Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I saw a film on Shudder that I thought was pretty solid. I was very impressed with this little flick. Not that it was anything amazing or anything like that, just it kind of surprised me. I didn't know it was going to be an anthology movie. I just kind of went into it knowing nothing really. And I had a good time for the most part. I started watching this yesterday, I finished it up today. It's called Asylum. It came out in 1972, and really the only name that you'll probably know in this movie is Peter Cushing. You also have, there was somebody else that I know I saw listed in here. Who else was it? Anyway, Peter Cushing is one of the stars in here. Not like a massive first main character in the film, but he's part of this too. Good old Peter Cushing. I love him to death. This film was actually directed by Roy Ward Baker, who did The Monster Club. I saw that a long time ago, a couple of years ago, and it was pretty solid. I don't know if I like that more than this. That film had weaker anthological stories or whatever, but this one had better stuff, mainly because it was written by Robert Bloch, who created Psycho. You know, he wrote the original book and whatever. Robert Bloch was a massive horror and TV writer back in the day. Not to the extent of somebody like Richard Matheson, but like, he was very talented. I'm not a big fan of 1970s horror, just in case you don't know where I'm coming from. But this actually very much surprised me. Yes, it's kind of a slow burn movie. Yes, it has its slow parts, but for the most part, everything was really fun. The general idea of this story is you have a guy who's coming for a job interview at this asylum, and when he gets there, he is told that the doctor apparently is one of the patients in this building, and we don't know for sure why, but the main assistant guy that he meets is telling him, hey, go around and interview these 4 different people, these 4 different patients in here, tell me who you think is the doctor. They kind of have like this little bit of a game spat going on, and that kind of will affect his interview. It's a very oddball interview. I don't think anybody would go through with this if that were the case. You can't really diagnose anybody on day one of meeting them as a therapist or as a doctor in his situation, whatever he's doing here. I don't know what position he's going for. I think it's like a doctor thing. I wasn't paying attention to that part as much at the beginning, but I did get sucked in. I think the atmosphere is pretty cool with the asylum portion of it. The actual stories themselves, I don't really need to go into each of those, but like I said, he pretty much interviews 4 separate patients in here, and each of their stories and why they're in the asylum. I feel like 2 out of the 3 are pretty solid, and then you have a 4th one who is kind of tied directly into the asylum story at the end of the movie, the 3rd act, if you will. And that one was really solid too. That might be the best, in my opinion. But the first 2 were really solid. I really enjoyed those, mainly the first short story here. I don't want to get too much into them. The main first story outside of the first interview, I guess, that he does, is about a man who's cheating on his wife with a younger woman, and they plot to murder his wife. The second story is about a man who was losing his business back in the day. He was, what are they called? The people who sew up clothing and stuff. Anyway, he was going to lose his store because he hadn't paid rent, and Peter Cushing walks in on this short and tells him, hey, I have these very specific directions I want you to do, since I'm into astrology and whatever, and I want you to make this suit based around all of these instructions. A lot of these are saying he has to make this suit late at night, on like a full moon, that kind of thing. Very interesting little story. Not as good as the first one, but it was pretty solid. The third story in here is kind of weak. It's about a lady recalling something involving a little bit of mental health stuff. It wasn't that great. This is the weakest story for me. And then the 4th interview that he does is involving a fellow who has these little dolls of all these people he knows or knew before he got locked up in the asylum. And these dolls look like the heads of regular people with robotic-looking bodies. And they look like they'd be controlled by like remote control, like RC type stuff. He claims that these little people, these little dolls or whatever, robots, whatever they are, he claims that they can come to life, that they have innards and brains and guts and all that stuff. And I'll tell you, I didn't know how much I believed the guy, but by the end of this, I really, really liked the way this story concluded. And the twist at the very end of the film I really liked, finding out who was the actual doctor that had been locked up or whatever. I had a good time watching Asylum. It's not like a massive recommendation for me, but if you like anthology movies, this is for you. It's not really scary by any means. It's kind of goofy more than it is silly. Not in like a, we know this is a goofy movie type of way either. It just, in a 2022 perspective, almost 50 years down the road, well, I guess it would be 50 years. Jesus. 50 years down the road looking back at this, it's really kind of silly and kind of goofy, but I had a good time. It made me laugh at times when I probably wasn't supposed to laugh. but I still had a good time, and I do recommend it on that alone. If you happen to have a Shudder account or an Amazon Prime account, I think it says it's also on Freevee according to IMDb. If you have an account with any of those things, check it out. It's really not the worst thing you could watch if you want something a little bit different, a little bit slower in pacing. I had a good time. It's well shot. It's mostly well acted. You have the kind of off performances here and there. I think everybody tried to do their best, and I think they kind of pulled through for the most part. The writing itself is not super strong. It's better than Monster Club, like I said, at least when it comes to the actual stories in this anthology. But the actual Asylum story, I think, was really, really intriguing. I liked that a lot. The look of the movie is kind of cheap, just a little bit. The effects can sometimes be cheap, but for the most part, with things like the little doll people, and like things like the first story about the husband and wife storyline, all of that was pretty solid when it came to the effects. It wasn't anything amazing, but for 1972, not too bad. Not too bad for quite a bit, maybe 5 years before Star Wars came out. Yeah, music is okay. You have the one main song, I think, is from like The Shining, and you'll know it when you hear it. It's something you've heard a billion times if you watched a lot of like public domain type horror movies. That's good too. Solid, fitting. It's not really always present in the movie, but when there's music, it's solid, like I said. When it comes to Asylum, I really don't have much more to say about this movie. It's just, it's a fine, decent, different little experience that I had. I'm glad I watched it. It was something different. It's above average for me, nothing bland really. It has its moments of being bland, like that third story I talked about, the third interview or whatever you want to call it. But anyway, Asylum, if I had to rate this film on a 5-star basis, I'd give it a 3 out of 5 stars. It's kind of a high 3, frankly. It might not feel that way to a lot of people, but for me, I thought it was on the positive side. I was very impressed with what it was. Anyway, have you seen Asylum? What did you think about it? Put your thoughts and comments down below. I would love to hear what you all have to say about Asylum. Anyway, thank you guys. God bless you all, and goodbye.